Introduction. Why nice is not the same as strong. There is a common belief that being nice is a virtue, that the man who is agreeable, accommodating, and always seeking to please others will naturally be rewarded with success, admiration, and love. But reality does not work that way. In fact, the opposite is often true. The nice guy syndrome is a trap, a subtle but insidious form of weakness disguised as virtue. It convinces men that avoiding conflict, seeking approval, and putting others' needs before their own will lead to happiness. Instead, it leads to frustration, resentment, and a life of quiet disappointment. A nice guy is not necessarily a good man. There's a fundamental difference between genuine kindness and conditioned weakness. A good man is strong, assertive, and capable of standing up for himself and others. A nice guy is merely agreeable, often to his own detriment. He seeks validation instead of self-ownership. He prioritizes comfort over challenge. He avoids confrontation, thinking it makes him righteous when, in reality, it makes him invisible. But here's the hard truth. The world does not respect weakness. Women are not attracted to men who need their approval. Success does not come to those who passively wait for permission to claim it. And happiness does not belong to those who sacrifice their authenticity just to be liked. If you've spent your life being nice, in the hopes that the world would recognize your worth, you already know this to be true. You've felt the disappointment of giving too much and receiving little in return. You've experienced the frustration of suppressing your own needs to keep the peace. And deep down, you've questioned why, despite doing everything right, you still feel unfulfilled. This book will shatter that illusion. It is not an invitation to become arrogant, cruel, or indifferent to others. It is a call to reclaim your power, to unlearn the weakness that has been disguised as kindness, to replace passivity with strength, approval-seeking with confidence, and hesitation with decisive action. Each chapter will guide you through this transformation, from understanding the roots of nice guy syndrome to building the kind of internal power that commands respect in every area of life. You will learn to set boundaries without guilt, lead without apology, and develop the mental toughness that separates men who succeed from those who remain stuck in the background. Because the truth is this: strong men are not defined by how many people like them. They are defined by their ability to stand firm, act with purpose, and command their own destiny. The world respects power, not submission. And it's time you claimed yours. Chapter 1. The Root of Nice Guy Syndrome. A man does not wake up one morning and decide to become a nice guy. It is not a conscious choice, nor is it a weakness he willingly adopts. It is something that is conditioned into him over years, subtly woven into his behavior, thoughts, and identity by the world around him. The roots of nice guy syndrome are deep, often stretching back to childhood, reinforced by societal expectations, family dynamics, and a fear of rejection so ingrained that it shapes the way he moves through life. He is not weak by nature. He has been trained to act weak, taught that compliance is a virtue, and that self-sacrifice is the highest form of goodness. And like millions of other men, he falls into this pattern, believing that if he is just nice enough, life will eventually reward him. But life does not work this way. The world does not hand out respect to those who passively wait for it. It does not reward men who avoid confrontation, who suppress their desires, who prioritize the comfort of others over their own self-respect. The truth is, The nice guy is not nice because he is naturally kind. He is nice because he is afraid. Afraid of upsetting people. Afraid of standing his ground. Afraid that if he asserts himself, if he demands more, if he refuses to play the role he has been assigned, he will lose whatever approval he has managed to secure. And so, he conforms. He avoids risk. He shrinks himself into a version of manhood that is digestible, agreeable, and safe. This is where the real damage begins. Because a man who operates from fear, who builds his identity around avoiding rejection, does not just lose respect from others, he loses respect for himself. He becomes a man who hesitates when he should act, who overthinks when he should move, who waits for permission when he should be taking what he wants. And worst of all, he convinces himself that this is the right way to live, that avoiding conflict is the same as being a good man, that putting himself last is a noble sacrifice rather than an act of self-betrayal. No man is born a nice guy. He is molded into one. The conditioning often starts in childhood, reinforced by well-meaning but misguided authority figures, parents, teachers, social norms, all teaching him that to be loved, he must earn it through compliance. If he grows up in a household where approval is conditional, where love is given when he is obedient but withdrawn when he asserts himself, he learns that his worth is tied to how much he pleases others. He begins to associate personal power with disapproval, strength with punishment, and boundaries with conflict. In school, this conditioning deepens. He is rewarded for being quiet, for following the rules, for never questioning authority. He watches as the bold, confident boys command attention, while he is praised for being polite and well-behaved. He internalizes the idea that to fit in, to be accepted, he must be non-threatening, agreeable, and easy to deal with. By the time he reaches adulthood, these patterns are fully ingrained. He has been taught, directly or indirectly, that his primary role in life is to make others comfortable, even at the cost of his own self-respect. But the worst reinforcement of all comes in his relationships, especially with women. He believes that by being the perfect listener, the patient friend, the reliable shoulder to cry on, he will eventually be chosen. He watches as the men who challenge, who lead, who assert themselves are the ones who receive desire and admiration, while he is relegated to the role of the safe option, the backup plan, the nice guy, who is great on paper but never truly desired. And instead of seeing this as a flaw in his approach, he doubles down, convinced that if he just tries harder, gives more, and proves his worth, he will finally be seen. This is the great lie of nice guy syndrome. The belief that approval leads to respect, that playing it safe leads to success, that being endlessly available and accommodating will eventually make him desirable. But the reality is that this behavior does not inspire admiration, it breeds indifference. It does not lead to respect, it leads to being overlooked. The more he tries to be everything to everyone, the more invisible he becomes. And deep down, beneath the layers of conditioned behavior, he knows this. No matter how much a nice guy tells himself that he is happy, that he enjoys being selfless, that he prefers avoiding confrontation, there is always a quiet dissatisfaction lurking beneath the surface. He feels it when he is passed over for promotions at work, despite being the one who puts in the most effort. He feels it when he watches a woman he adores fall for a man who is less nice, but undeniably more confident. He feels it when he realizes that despite all his efforts to be the perfect friend, partner, or employee, he is not respected, not prioritized, not seen as someone who commands authority. And this is where resentment begins to grow. A resentment that he does not acknowledge, but that builds in quiet, bitter moments. He tells himself that people are ungrateful, that women do not appreciate good men, that if only the world recognized what a great person he is, things would be different. But this resentment is not truly toward others, it is toward himself. Because deep down, he knows the truth. He has been playing the wrong game all along. To break free from nice guy syndrome, a man must undergo a fundamental shift in his thinking. He must stop looking outward for validation and start looking inward for power. He must stop trying to earn respect and start commanding it. He must realize that being kind and being weak are not the same thing. That true kindness is rooted in strength, not in submission. This transformation does not happen overnight. It requires unlearning years, sometimes decades, of conditioning. It requires stepping into discomfort, facing rejection without fear, asserting boundaries without apology. It means no longer shrinking in the presence of conflict, no longer allowing the fear of disapproval to dictate his actions. It means understanding that he is not on this earth to be liked. He is here to be respected. Most importantly, it requires making peace with the reality that not everyone will approve of his transformation. Some people will push back when he starts asserting himself. Some women will test him to see if his confidence is real or just an act. Some friends and colleagues will be uncomfortable with his shift in presence, because a man who stops seeking validation is a man who is uncontrollable. But this discomfort is proof that the transformation is real. The path out of nice guy syndrome is not about becoming aggressive, reckless, or indifferent to others. It is about stepping into true masculine strength. It is about carrying himself with authority, about leading rather than following, about owning his presence instead of waiting for permission. It is about finally living for himself, rather than bending to the expectations of others. A nice guy is not doomed to remain weak. But his freedom will only come when he decides, fully, completely, and without hesitation, that he is done with playing small. That from this moment forward, he will no longer negotiate his worth. That he will no longer ask for respect. He will demand it. Chapter 2. The Cost of Being a Nice Guy. There is no such thing as being too nice. At least, that is what most nice guys tell themselves. They believe their kindness, their endless patience, their willingness to put others first is a strength. They convince themselves that if they just continue giving, sacrificing, and proving their worth, life will eventually reward them. But the truth is, the cost of being a nice guy is far greater than most men realize. It does not just affect their relationships, it bleeds into every area of their lives, stripping them of power, limiting their success, and ultimately leaving them unfulfilled, frustrated, and resentful. Nice guys live in a quiet state of self-denial, convincing themselves that their approach to life is the right one while constantly dealing with the reality that it is not working. They struggle in their careers, watching as bolder, more assertive men rise while they remain overlooked. They suffer in relationships, unable to understand why their devotion is met with indifference, while women are drawn to men who seem to care far less. They feel trapped, unseen, and undervalued, yet they refuse to acknowledge the truth. They have created this reality for themselves. Being a nice guy is not a harmless trait. It is not an innocent quirk or a personality type to be proud of. It is a mindset that kills ambition, suffocates self-respect, and breeds frustration. And the longer a man clings to it, the more damage it does. Nice guys rarely reach their full potential. Not because they lack intelligence, skill, or work ethic, but because they refuse to assert themselves. They hesitate to negotiate for higher salaries, fearing they might come off as greedy. They avoid taking leadership positions because they do not want to seem too aggressive. They accept extra work without complaint, believing that if they just prove their dedication, their efforts will be recognized. But the world does not work this way. People do not hand out rewards to the most compliant. Promotions do not go to the most agreeable. Wealth and power are not given to those who wait their turn. The men who succeed are the ones who demand what they are worth, who take bold action, who are unafraid to make people uncomfortable when necessary. Nice guys fail to realize that in the game of life, aggressors win and passive participants are left behind. And so, while they wait for recognition, for appreciation, for someone to finally notice how hard they have been working, they watch as other men with less talent but more courage, rise above them. They convince themselves that these men are just lucky or naturally confident, when in reality, the only difference is that those men were willing to go after what they wanted, while the nice guy hoped it would be given to him. The greatest betrayal of the nice guy mindset is that it does not even work in relationships. Despite all the effort they put into being the perfect, attentive, emotionally available partner, they are not the ones who inspire desire. They are not the men who women chase, admire, or respect. And deep down, this destroys them. A nice guy in a relationship often believes that if he just gives enough, if he just loves her more, if he just accommodates her every need, she will reciprocate that energy. But what he fails to understand is that attraction does not work this way. Women do not respect men who submit to them. They do not feel desire for men who are always available, always agreeable, always waiting for direction. They may appreciate these men, they may even care about them, but they do not admire them. And without admiration, attraction slowly dies. Nice guys often find themselves in relationships where they feel like they are doing everything right, yet their partner is distant, emotionally disengaged, or worse, interested in another man. And instead of recognizing that their behavior is the problem, they double down, giving even more, trying even harder to prove their worth. But by doing this, they only reinforce their weakness. They confirm that they are not the prize, that they are chasing rather than being pursued, that they are operating from a place of lack rather than abundance. And when this pattern continues long enough, the resentment begins to build. The nice guy starts to feel like the world is unfair, like women are illogical for rejecting good men, while rewarding those who treat them with indifference. But this resentment is misplaced. Because the truth is, women are not rejecting good men, they are rejecting weak men. They are rejecting men who do not lead, men who do not command respect, men who rely on external validation to feel worthy. Perhaps the greatest cost of being a nice guy is the way it destroys self-respect. A man who constantly suppresses his needs, who prioritizes others over himself, who avoids conflict and refuses to assert his desires, does not just lose the respect of others, he loses respect for himself. He tells himself that he is happy, that he is content with being nice, that he does not mind sacrificing for others. But deep down, there is a voice that knows the truth. This is not how a man was meant to live. A man is meant to take risks, to assert himself, to challenge the world and carve out his own path. When he denies this part of himself, when he trades ambition for safety, power for compliance, leadership for passive accommodation, he feels it in his soul. He may not acknowledge it openly, but it manifests in quiet ways, in frustration, in stress, in a constant sense of not being enough, despite all his efforts. Over time, this takes a toll on his mental health. He feels drained, anxious, disconnected from his own sense of purpose. He begins to withdraw, to lose motivation, to numb himself with distractions. And yet, he refuses to confront the real issue, that he is living out of alignment with who he was meant to be. The cost of being a nice guy is too high. It is a life of mediocrity, of unrealized potential, of silent frustration. And if a man wants to break free, he must be willing to face discomfort. He must be willing to stop prioritizing approval and start prioritizing self-respect. This does not mean abandoning kindness or becoming cold and detached. It means redefining what it means to be strong. It means understanding that true kindness is not about self-sacrifice, it is about power. A powerful man can be kind, but he is never weak. He does not give to others at his own expense. He does not tolerate disrespect. He does not fear rejection or conflict. A man who refuses to be a nice guy anymore demands more, from himself, from others, from life itself. He understands that success, power, and respect are not given to those who wait passively for them. They are taken by those who have the courage to claim them. And so, the question is simple. Are you willing to let go of the nice guy mentality? Are you willing to stop hoping that the world will reward your compliance and start moving with unapologetic strength? Because the men who break free, the men who decide that they will no longer live passively, that they will no longer trade their power for approval, are the men who dominate life. And those who don't? They stay exactly where they are. Overlooked, unfulfilled, and forgotten. In the next chapter, we will go even deeper into the transformation process, into shifting from an approval seeker to a power holder. Because the moment you stop looking for validation outside of yourself is the moment you become truly untouchable. Chapter 3. From Approval Seeker to Power Holder. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes that the way he has been operating is not working. He has spent years, maybe even decades, seeking approval, trying to please everyone, avoiding conflict, and bending over backward to make himself more likable. He has believed, consciously or unconsciously, that if he is just good enough, if he is accommodating, agreeable, and selfless, then he will be rewarded with respect, success, and love. But at some point, he wakes up to a painful truth. The approval he has worked so hard for has never truly given him the power he thought it would. Instead of respect, he receives indifference. Instead of love, he experiences unfulfillment. Instead of success, he finds himself stuck, watching men who are bolder, less apologetic, and more assertive rise while he remains overlooked. This realization is not comfortable, but it is necessary. The moment a man understands that approval seeking is a prison is the moment he can begin to break free from it. Because here is the truth. The world does not reward men who beg for validation. It rewards men who own themselves completely. A man who seeks approval is reactive. His emotions, his confidence, and his sense of self-worth are dictated by how others respond to him. If people like him, he feels good. If they disapprove, he feels anxious. If they ignore him, he feels invisible. He does not live for himself. He lives through the eyes of others. This is the source of his weakness. His identity is not his own. It is something he has outsourced to the world, hoping for permission to exist in a way that makes him feel valued. But power does not work that way. A man who has stepped into his power does not ask for permission to be himself. He does not filter his words or suppress his desires to fit into the mold of what he thinks others want. He does not fear rejection because he knows rejection is not a reflection of his worth. He does not change his opinions based on what is socially acceptable in the moment. He stands firm. He moves with certainty. He does not seek validation because he has already validated himself. Making this shift, from an approval seeker to a man who commands respect, requires a fundamental change in mindset. The first step is accepting that you cannot control how others feel about you, but you can control how you show up in the world. The second step is to stop filtering yourself. This means expressing your thoughts without hesitation, saying what you mean without watering it down to make it more palatable, and allowing yourself to be fully seen, even if it means not everyone will like you. Many men hesitate to do this because they have been conditioned to believe that their worth is tied to how well they can make others comfortable. But this belief is the root of their weakness. A man who constantly softens his edges to avoid offending anyone will never be taken seriously. The world respects strength, not compliance. Another key shift in mindset is making decisions based on your own internal standards rather than external validation. Too many men hesitate to take action because they are stuck in the trap of wondering, "What will people think?" But this question is irrelevant. The real question is, what do I want? A man who operates from his own set of values, who sets boundaries and enforces them, who knows what he stands for and refuses to compromise on it, is a man who commands respect without having to demand it. This kind of man is not easily manipulated because he does not operate from fear. He does not tolerate disrespect because he is not desperate to be liked. He does not change his course to accommodate every opinion thrown his way. He decides. He leads. He owns himself completely. This transition from approval seeker to power holder also requires embracing rejection. The fear of rejection is one of the strongest forces keeping men weak. It prevents them from speaking up, taking risks, and asserting themselves in situations where they should. But rejection is not something to be feared, it is a filtering mechanism. A strong man does not need everyone to like him. He understands that standing for something means some people will disagree, and that is a good thing. Trying to please everyone makes a man weak, unremarkable, and forgettable. Strength, confidence, and leadership naturally polarize people. They attract those who respect and admire them while repelling those who are intimidated by them. And that is exactly how it should be. One of the most important aspects of this transformation is learning to sit with discomfort rather than avoiding it. Nice guys avoid confrontation because they equate disagreement with conflict, and they fear conflict because they believe it threatens their likability. But men who hold power do not run from difficult conversations or situations that test them. They are willing to be uncomfortable because they understand that discomfort is a requirement for growth. A man who always chooses the easiest, most comfortable path remains weak. A man who challenges himself, who does what is necessary instead of what is easy, develops the kind of confidence that cannot be shaken. At the core of this transformation is the ability to own your desires without apology. Many men suppress what they want, whether in relationships, career, or life, because they are afraid of being judged. They hold themselves back, waiting for permission to take what they know they deserve. But no one is coming to give you permission. No one is going to hand you power, respect, or success just because you are a good person. You must take it. This does not mean being selfish or ruthless. It means recognizing that confidence comes from action, not from waiting. If you want something, go after it. If you have a standard, enforce it. If you have an ambition, pursue it with full intensity. A man who is stuck in the nice guy mentality believes that if he gives enough, sacrifices enough, and proves his worth enough, he will finally be valued. But that is a lie. People do not respect men who constantly seek approval. They respect men who stand firm in their own value. The moment you stop trying to be liked by everyone, you become free. Free to act without hesitation. Free to express yourself without fear. Free to live life on your own terms rather than adjusting yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. And here's the paradox. The less you seek approval, the more people respect you. When you speak with certainty, people listen. When you move with confidence, people follow. When you carry yourself with the energy of a man who does not need validation, others are drawn to you. This is because true confidence is rare. Most men are desperate to be liked, constantly molding themselves into whatever they think will gain them the most approval. But the men who stand out, the men who lead, succeed, and command respect, are the ones who refuse to play that game. The greatest men in history were not liked by everyone. They were controversial. They were criticized. But they were respected. They lived by their own code, operated on their own terms, and never begged for permission to be who they were. That is the kind of man you must become. A man who does not wait for validation but creates it. A man who does not apologize for his existence but takes full ownership of it. A man who does not live for approval but for mastery of himself. In the next chapter, we will dive deeper into one of the most essential traits of a man who holds power, the ability to set boundaries. Because men who command respect do not allow their lives to be dictated by others. They define their own standards, enforce them unapologetically, and refuse to tolerate anything less than what they deserve. If you want to step into your power fully, you must master the art of setting unbreakable boundaries. And that is exactly what we will do next. Chapter 4. The Strength of Setting Boundaries. There is no faster way to lose respect, both from others and from yourself, than to live without boundaries. A man without boundaries is a man who is constantly at the mercy of others. His time, his energy, and his self-respect are given away freely. Not because he wants to, but because he is too afraid to say no. He allows people to walk over him, not because he lacks intelligence or self-awareness, but because he has been conditioned to believe that being agreeable is the path to being liked. But there is a price to this weakness. Every time a man tolerates disrespect, he loses a piece of his own power. Every time he says yes when he wants to say no, he reinforces the belief that his needs come second. And every time he allows others to dictate the terms of his life, he weakens his ability to command his own destiny. A man who does not set boundaries is not seen as kind, he is seen as weak. People do not admire him for being accommodating, they take advantage of him. Women do not respect him for his patience, they grow bored of him. Employers do not value his willingness to do more, they expect it and give him nothing in return. The world does not reward men who allow themselves to be used. It rewards men who demand what they are worth and enforce the standards they set for themselves. The uncomfortable truth is that the level of respect you receive in life is directly proportional to the strength of your boundaries. If you accept mediocrity, people will give you mediocrity. If you tolerate disrespect, people will continue to disrespect you. If you fail to assert what you truly want, you will always be left with what others decide you deserve. But setting boundaries is not just about demanding respect from others, it is about cultivating self-respect. A man who lacks boundaries is a man who has abandoned himself. He has prioritized keeping the peace over protecting his own dignity. He has chosen comfort over self-respect, avoiding conflict because he fears confrontation more than he values his own worth. But the problem with avoiding conflict is that it does not actually keep the peace, it only delays the inevitable. The resentment that builds from constantly giving in, constantly bending, constantly allowing yourself to be taken for granted, eventually turns into bitterness. And that bitterness seeps into every area of your life. It makes you passive-aggressive, withdrawn, or explosive when you can no longer contain it. It creates frustration in your relationships, your work, and your personal life, all because you were too afraid to draw a line and enforce it. True power comes from the ability to set a standard and refuse to lower it. This means knowing what you will and will not tolerate, making those boundaries clear, and standing firm no matter the reaction. Weak men crumble under pressure, apologizing for their own standards, backing down the moment they sense discomfort in others. But strong men hold the line. They understand that discomfort is the price of self-respect, and they are willing to pay it. They know that the people who truly respect them will adapt to their boundaries, and those who resist them were never meant to stay in their lives to begin with. But setting boundaries is not just about saying no, it is about having a code of conduct for yourself. It means establishing clear principles for how you operate in the world and refusing to compromise them. A man without a personal code is a man who is easily swayed, easily influenced, and easily controlled. He does not own himself. He is shaped by whatever external forces push against him the hardest. But a man who has a strong set of internal boundaries, who knows what he values, what he will accept, and what he will never tolerate, is a man who cannot be manipulated. He does not need to argue or justify himself because his actions speak for him. One of the greatest shifts a man can make in his life is moving from a place of needing external approval to a place of enforcing internal standards. The nice guy allows others to set the terms of his interactions. He adapts to what they want, hoping that in doing so, he will be rewarded with validation. But a man who has stepped into his power does not operate that way. He does not ask, "What do they want from me?" He asks, "What do I want for myself?" And then he acts accordingly. If a situation does not align with his standards, he walks away. If a person crosses a line, he enforces the consequence. If he sets a rule for his life, he follows it, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Many men struggle with setting boundaries because they fear the reaction they might get. They worry that if they start saying no, they will lose friends, upset people, or push away those they care about. And they are right. When a man finally enforces his boundaries, people who benefited from his weakness will resist. They will test him, guilt-trip him, and try to manipulate him back into compliance. But this is part of the process. Strength does not come without resistance. The people who truly belong in your life will adjust to your boundaries. The ones who disappear were never there for you in the first place. They were there for what they could take from you. The key to setting boundaries is to start small. You do not need to overhaul your entire personality overnight. Begin by paying attention to the moments when you feel resentment. These are often signs that a boundary is being crossed. Notice when you hesitate to say no, when you suppress your true opinion, or when you agree to something that you do not actually want to do. In those moments, pause and ask yourself, am I acting out of fear, or am I acting out of strength? If the answer is fear, choose differently. Assert yourself. Set the boundary. Let the discomfort happen. Because the more you practice enforcing boundaries, the more natural it becomes. And over time, you will notice something incredible. People will begin to treat you differently. They will respect your time more. They will take you more seriously. They will listen when you speak, not because you demanded it, but because you have demonstrated through your actions that you are a man who commands respect. There is no shortcut to this process. The only way to build strong boundaries is to enforce them, again and again, until they become an unshakable part of who you are. And the rewards for doing so are immense. A man who has strong boundaries experiences life differently. He does not feel drained by endless obligations or manipulated by guilt. He does not waste energy on people who do not value him. He does not tolerate disrespect, not because he is defensive, but because he knows he is worth more than that. He moves through the world with a quiet confidence, secure in himself, unbothered by the opinions of those who do not meet his standards. The difference between a weak man and a powerful man is not intelligence, luck, or even talent. It is the ability to set and enforce boundaries. Because a man who controls his life does not allow himself to be controlled by others. A man who respects himself does not tolerate disrespect. And a man who owns his time, his energy, and his decisions is a man who is truly free. In the next chapter, we will dive deeper into one of the biggest misconceptions nice guys have about relationships: the belief that being excessively nice will make them more attractive. Because the truth is, women do not respect submission, they respect strength. And until a man learns to embody that strength, he will always struggle in his relationships, no matter how much he gives. It is time to break that illusion once and for all. Chapter 5. The lie of being nice gets you love. For generations, men have been told that the key to winning a woman's heart is to be the nice guy, to be overly accommodating, endlessly patient, and always willing to put her needs above his own. Society reinforces this idea, pushing the belief that if a man just loves a woman enough, if he showers her with affection, listens to her problems without ever asserting his own needs, and never creates tension, then he will be rewarded with devotion in return. But reality does not reflect this illusion. The truth is, women do not fall in love with men who seek their approval. They do not desire men who prioritize pleasing them over leading. They do not respect men who make themselves doormats in the hope of being chosen. The reason so many nice guys struggle in relationships, or worse, end up bitter and confused when their kindness is ignored or exploited, is because they fail to understand a fundamental truth about attraction. Women are drawn to strength, not submission. A man who operates from the belief that his niceness will be enough to win a woman's love is setting himself up for failure. Because niceness, in itself, is not an attractive trait. It is a neutral trait. Being polite, agreeable, and accommodating are not things that spark deep attraction in a woman. They are expected behaviors, basic human decency. A woman does not wake up thinking, "I need to find a man who is nice to me." She desires a man who makes her feel something. A man who exudes confidence, purpose, and the kind of self-assurance that makes her respect him. A man who can lead, set boundaries, and stand firm in his own identity. Nice guys misunderstand attraction because they view relationships through the lens of transaction. They believe that if they give enough, if they are patient enough, understanding enough, self-sacrificing enough, then they should be owed love and commitment in return. But love is not a debt. It is not something that can be earned through passive kindness or through the suppression of one's own needs. When a man places a woman on a pedestal, making her the center of his world while diminishing himself in the process, he does not inspire her love, he kills her attraction. Attraction is not built through comfort alone, it is built through polarity. A woman does not feel passion for a man who is overly accommodating, who agrees with everything she says, or who never challenges her. She craves a man with direction, a man who has standards and expectations, a man who is willing to walk away if his needs are not met. Strength is what inspires devotion, not blind compliance. A woman will never respect a man who does not respect himself, and a man who grovels for love is a man who has already lost his dignity. The irony is that nice guys often blame women when their relationships fail, believing that women only like bad boys, or that they always go for jerks. But this is a complete misunderstanding of what is really happening. Women are not drawn to men because they are cruel or disrespectful. They are drawn to men who are unapologetically themselves, who do not seek approval, and who move through life with a strong sense of self. The so-called bad boys are simply men who prioritize their own desires over seeking validation. They do not chase women, they do not ask for permission to be themselves, and they do not give away their power. This confidence, this ability to lead and set the tone of the relationship, is what makes them attractive. It is not their mistreatment of women, it is their lack of neediness. The deeper issue with nice guys is that their niceness is not actually genuine. It is performative. It is a mask worn in the hope of receiving something in return. They suppress their true emotions, avoid confrontation, and agree to things they do not actually want, all in an attempt to keep the peace and remain likable. But women sense this inauthenticity. A man who does not show his true self, who hides his needs and desires, who tiptoes around difficult conversations, comes across as weak, not because he lacks value, but because he lacks honesty. Women would rather be with a man who is real, even if that means he is blunt or imperfect, than with a man who is so afraid of disapproval that he suppresses his truth. The strongest relationships are not built on a man bending himself to fit a woman's expectations. They are built on mutual respect, on a dynamic where both partners bring something of value. A man who knows his worth does not beg for attention. He does not tolerate disrespect. He does not compromise his core values in the hope of being accepted. Instead, he leads with certainty. He shows up as himself, without pretense, without the need to prove his value. And paradoxically, this is what makes him valuable. The shift from being a nice guy to a man who commands attraction is not about becoming an arrogant, selfish brute. It is about learning to stand in your power. It is about realizing that you are not here to prove yourself to a woman. You are here to live your life, build your mission, and let the right woman recognize your value because of who you are, not because of what you give. This means setting boundaries in relationships, being willing to walk away from situations that do not serve you, and understanding that your worth is not dependent on how much you do for someone else. It means embracing the discomfort of standing firm, of expressing your truth, even when it might not be what she wants to hear. It means understanding that tension, disagreement, and even rejection are not things to be feared. They are natural parts of any strong, healthy relationship. A woman will test a man's strength, not to manipulate him, but to see if he is solid. She will push his buttons, challenge his patience, and see if he will crumble under pressure or if he will hold his ground. This is not cruelty. It is instinct. Women do not want to be with men they can dominate. They want to be with men they can trust to remain unshaken. If a man folds at the first sign of resistance, if he apologizes for things that are not his fault, if he lets her dictate all the terms of the relationship, she will lose respect for him. And when respect dies, so does attraction. A nice guy's greatest fear is rejection, but in reality, rejection is a gift. It reveals incompatibility before time is wasted. It forces a man to grow, to sharpen his edges, to become more resilient. The man who fears rejection is the man who will never take risks, never go after what he truly wants, never experience the depth of passion and connection that comes from being fully, unapologetically himself. The man who embraces rejection, who understands that it is merely a filtering process, is the man who is free. The path to becoming a man who is truly desirable is not found in playing it safe, in being agreeable, in never rocking the boat. It is found in stepping fully into your power, in knowing who you are, in leading your life with conviction, in embracing the kind of strength that makes people respect you, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. The nice guy believes that love is something he must earn through relentless giving. But a man who understands his worth knows that love is not about earning, it is about alignment. The right woman does not need to be convinced. She recognizes strength when she sees it. She respects a man who respects himself. And she is drawn not to a man who begs for her affection, but to a man who does not need to. In the next chapter, we will take this understanding even further by addressing one of the greatest fears that holds men back, the fear of conflict. Because until a man learns to handle confrontation with confidence and strength, he will always struggle to maintain power in his relationships, his career, and his life as a whole. The world does not respect men who avoid conflict. It respects men who can stand firm in the face of it. And that is exactly what we will tackle next. Chapter 6. Conquering the Fear of Conflict. There is a reason so many men shrink in the face of confrontation. From a young age, they are conditioned to believe that conflict is something to be avoided, that disagreements are dangerous, that asserting themselves will only lead to rejection, isolation, or negative consequences. They are taught to be agreeable, to smooth things over, to avoid upsetting others. But the reality is that a man who fears conflict is a man who is easily controlled. He becomes a man who walks on eggshells, who prioritizes peace over his own truth, who sacrifices his own needs just to keep everyone around him comfortable. And in doing so, he loses his power. A man who cannot handle confrontation will never be fully respected. People sense his hesitation, his avoidance, his unwillingness to hold his ground. They learn, consciously or unconsciously, that he can be persuaded, manipulated, or overridden simply by applying enough pressure. His relationships suffer because he does not enforce his standards. His career suffers because he does not demand what he is worth. His self-respect suffers because, deep down, he knows that every time he backs down when he should stand firm, he is betraying himself. But here is the truth. Conflict is not something to be feared. it is something to be mastered. A man who knows how to handle confrontation with confidence, control, and strength is a man who commands respect in every area of life. He does not seek conflict for the sake of it, but he also does not shy away from it when it is necessary. He does not explode emotionally, but neither does he allow himself to be silenced. He meets resistance with unwavering presence, knowing that the ability to stand his ground is the foundation of his power. The nice guy struggles with conflict because he sees it as a threat to his approval. He believes that if he upsets someone, they will stop liking him. If he asserts himself, he will push people away. If he holds a firm boundary, he will be judged. And because he has been taught to prioritize being liked over being respected, he avoids anything that might create discomfort. But discomfort is where growth happens. A man who refuses to engage in necessary conflict is a man who will forever remain trapped in relationships where he is not truly valued, in jobs where he is underappreciated, in friendships where he is merely tolerated rather than respected. The first step in overcoming the fear of conflict is to shift your mindset around it. Conflict is not inherently negative. It is not something that should be seen as an attack or a sign that something is wrong. Conflict is simply a natural part of human interaction. It is a test of boundaries, a clarification of expectations, a refinement of relationships. The difference between men who are controlled by conflict and men who handle it with power is not whether or not they experience it. It is how they respond to it. Weak men react emotionally, either by becoming aggressive or by shutting down completely. Strong men remain composed, assertive, and clear. They do not take things personally, but they also do not allow themselves to be disrespected. Handling conflict with power does not mean being confrontational for the sake of it. It does not mean seeking arguments or proving dominance at every opportunity. It means knowing when to push back, when to hold the line, when to speak up even when it is uncomfortable. It means being willing to say no, without guilt, to challenge ideas that do not align with your values, to walk away from situations that do not serve you. And most importantly, it means being completely at peace with the fact that not everyone will like you for it. This is where most nice guys fail. They are so deeply attached to the need to be liked that they will sacrifice their own dignity just to avoid conflict. They will apologize for things that are not their fault. They will downplay their needs so they do not seem difficult. They will tolerate things that make them uncomfortable just to keep the peace. But what they do not realize is that every time they choose comfort over confrontation, they are reinforcing their own weakness. They are teaching themselves to be passive, to be invisible, to be secondary in their own lives. If you want to become a man who commands respect, you must train yourself to lean into conflict rather than run from it. This does not mean reacting emotionally or trying to dominate others. It means standing firm in your truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes others. It means looking someone in the eye and saying, "I disagree," without flinching. It means calmly asserting your boundaries when they are tested. It means refusing to accept situations that do not align with your values, even if it means losing approval. And make no mistake, when you start doing this, people will resist. Those who are used to you being passive will push back. They will challenge you, they will test your resolve, they will try to guilt trip you into reverting to your old ways. But this is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are doing something right. Because strength is always tested. And only the men who are willing to pass those tests will truly step into their power. You do not need to be aggressive to be respected. You do not need to raise your voice, intimidate, or use force. The most powerful men in history did not lead through aggression. They led through unwavering certainty. They spoke with conviction, they enforced their boundaries, and they carried themselves in a way that made it clear that they did not need approval to stand in their truth. That is the level of presence you must develop. The next time you feel yourself avoiding a necessary confrontation, whether it is in your relationships, your work, or any other area of life, pause. Ask yourself, am I avoiding this because I genuinely believe it is unnecessary, or am I avoiding it because I fear disapproval? If the answer is fear, you already know what you must do. Step into it. Have the difficult conversation. Assert yourself. Do not apologize for your own standards. And most importantly, do not back down simply because someone is uncomfortable. Because the moment you start doing this, everything changes. People will begin to see you differently. They will listen more carefully when you speak. They will respect your time, your energy, and your boundaries. They will think twice before trying to take advantage of you. And most importantly, you will respect yourself in a way you never have before. The fear of conflict is one of the greatest chains holding men back from their true power. But once you break free from it, you become untouchable. You move through the world differently. You carry yourself with an authority that cannot be faked. You stop being a man who reacts, who pleases, who avoids. You become a man who commands. And this is the foundation of real leadership. A leader is not someone who waits for approval. He is someone who stands firm, who holds the line, who is willing to be disliked in order to stay true to himself. The next chapter will take this further, diving into why real leaders are never people pleasers, and how stepping into leadership, whether in your career, relationships, or personal life, requires shedding the need for validation entirely. Because at the end of the day, men who chase approval are followers. But men who embrace their own authority become the ones the world follows. Chapter 7. Why real leaders aren't people pleasers. There is a distinct difference between a man who leads and a man who follows. The follower seeks approval, waits for direction, and adjusts himself to fit the expectations of others. The leader moves with certainty, acts based on his own convictions, and does not bend to every opinion thrown his way. The follower craves validation. The leader commands respect. And yet, so many men remain trapped in the mindset of a follower, believing that if they can just make the right people happy, if they can be agreeable enough, if they can avoid upsetting anyone, then success and respect will naturally follow. But reality does not work that way. A man who pleases everyone leads no one. People do not follow men who seek their approval. They follow men who embody strength, confidence, and decisiveness. Leadership is not about popularity, it is about influence. It is about the ability to make tough decisions, to stand firm when others waver, to hold a vision and see it through despite resistance. It is about acting with purpose rather than waiting for permission. And yet, the modern nice guy still believes that if he is just nice enough, people will recognize his worth and naturally gravitate toward him. But he misunderstands a fundamental truth. No one follows a man who needs to be liked more than he needs to be strong. The fear of upsetting others is what keeps weak men stuck. They hesitate before speaking their minds, afraid that their opinions might be unpopular. They soften their stance when challenged, worried that holding firm will make them unlikable. They dilute their ambitions, afraid that aiming too high will make others uncomfortable. But in doing so, they render themselves ineffective. A man who is afraid to offend is a man who is afraid to lead. And a man who is afraid to lead is a man who will always be overlooked by those who are willing to step into that role. Real leaders are not reckless, nor are they needlessly confrontational. But they are willing to be disliked in order to stay true to their vision. They understand that no great leader in history has ever been universally loved. Every man who has ever made an impact, who has ever shaped the world in any meaningful way, has faced criticism, resistance, and opposition. And yet, they persisted, not because they were trying to be liked, but because they were committed to something greater than themselves. A leader who prioritizes approval over action is not a leader at all. He is a prisoner to the opinions of others. The difference between a people pleaser and a leader is that the people pleaser allows the opinions of others to dictate his path, while the leader allows his internal compass to guide him. This is why the nice guy struggles so much with leadership. He has spent his entire life looking outward for validation instead of looking inward for direction. He has trained himself to be reactive rather than proactive, to adjust himself based on how others respond to him instead of acting from a place of inner certainty. And because of this, he never truly takes control of his own life. To step into leadership, a man must be willing to make decisions based on his own principles rather than external approval. He must be willing to hold his ground even when people disagree with him. He must be willing to say no, to assert his standards, to set a course and follow it, regardless of who does or does not support him. This does not mean being rigid or dismissive of feedback. Strong leaders listen, they adapt, they refine their approach. But what they do not do is compromise their core values in order to win favor. They do not shrink themselves to avoid conflict. They do not hesitate when action is needed. They do not wait to be chosen, they choose themselves. The nice guy often struggles with the concept of leadership because he has been conditioned to believe that authority is something that must be granted to him by others. He believes that he must first prove himself, that he must earn permission to take charge. But this is a false belief. Leadership is not given, it is taken. It is assumed by those who are willing to step forward, to take responsibility, to bear the weight of decision-making. It is claimed by those who are willing to embrace both the rewards and the burdens that come with it. The man who waits for someone to tell him he is ready to lead will be waiting forever. One of the defining traits of strong leaders is their ability to handle criticism without being shaken by it. The people pleaser takes every piece of criticism personally. He sees disapproval as a threat to his worth. He feels the need to defend himself, to explain, to win people over. But the leader understands that criticism is inevitable. He does not take it as a personal attack. He takes it as information. He assesses whether it is valid, adjusts if necessary, and moves forward regardless. He does not crumble under judgment because he does not derive his sense of self from how others perceive him. He knows who he is, and that is enough. This mindset shift, from seeking validation to standing firm in one's own direction, is what separates those who lead from those who remain in the background. Leadership is not about having all the answers or being perfect. It is about having the courage to take action despite uncertainty. It is about being decisive when others hesitate, about moving forward even when the path is unclear. It is about having a vision and having the strength to see it through. And most importantly, it is about doing all of this without needing applause or approval. To become a man who commands respect, You must be willing to break free from the addiction to being liked. You must be willing to say what needs to be said, to make the hard choices, to take responsibility even when it is uncomfortable. You must be willing to carry yourself with the presence of a man who does not need permission to lead, because the world does not follow men who wait. It follows men who decide. The shift from being a people pleaser to a leader is not an easy one. It requires unlearning years of conditioning, stepping into discomfort, and embracing the reality that not everyone will like you. But once you do, everything changes. You will find that people listen more attentively when you speak. That your relationships improve, not because you are more agreeable, but because you are more respected. That opportunities begin to come your way, not because you are waiting for them, but because you are creating them. The world does not need more men who seek approval. It needs more men who are willing to step up, take responsibility, and lead with strength and certainty. And that is exactly what you are going to become. In the next chapter, we will explore one of the greatest enemies of true leadership, the addiction to comfort. Because nice guys do not just seek approval, they seek safety. They avoid risk, they cling to the familiar, they resist challenge. But comfort is the enemy of strength, and no man can truly step into his power until he is willing to embrace discomfort, challenge, and adversity. The path to becoming unstoppable does not begin with ease, it begins with stepping into the fire. And that is what we will conquer next. Chapter 8. The Warrior Mindset, Strength over Comfort. A man's greatest enemy is not failure. It is not rejection. It is not even fear. His greatest enemy is comfort. The addiction to comfort, to ease, to avoiding struggle. This is what weakens men more than anything else. A man who prioritizes comfort over challenge, who avoids adversity, who seeks the path of least resistance, is a man who will never reach his full potential. He will remain stagnant, trapped in a cycle of mediocrity, wondering why he never quite breaks through, never quite achieves what he desires, never quite becomes the man he knows he is capable of being. The truth is that comfort is a slow poison. It seduces a man into complacency, lulling him into a false sense of security. It convinces him that avoiding difficulty is the same as finding peace, that a stress-free life is the goal, that hardship is something to be feared rather than embraced. But the reality is that every great man in history was forged in discomfort. Every warrior, every leader, every man who has ever built something of significance did so by willingly stepping into the fire. The modern world has made it easier than ever for men to stay weak. Instant gratification is everywhere. Easy entertainment, easy food, easy distraction. A man can numb himself for hours, days, even years, without ever confronting the discomfort of his own untapped potential. And yet, deep down, he knows. He knows that his desire for comfort is robbing him of something greater. He knows that every time he chooses the easy path, he is betraying himself. He knows that the version of himself he could be, the strong, disciplined, powerful version, is on the other side of discomfort. And yet, he avoids it, telling himself that tomorrow, next week, next year, he will finally take action. But tomorrow never comes. The nice guy is particularly susceptible to this trap because he was raised to believe that comfort is the goal. He was told that avoiding conflict would bring him peace. That waiting for the right moment would bring him success. That being agreeable and non-confrontational would bring him love and respect. But none of this is true. The real world does not reward men who choose comfort. It rewards men who step up, who embrace difficulty, who push themselves beyond their limits. A man who is willing to suffer for his own growth is a man who becomes unstoppable. This is the foundation of the warrior mindset: strength over comfort. It is the decision to prioritize discipline over ease, challenge over convenience, self-mastery over self-indulgence. It is the refusal to be seduced by laziness, distraction, or avoidance. It is the commitment to becoming the strongest version of yourself. Not when it is convenient, not when motivation strikes, but every single day, without excuse. Developing this mindset requires rewiring your relationship with struggle. Most men view struggle as something to avoid. They see hardship as a sign that something is wrong. But men who thrive, men who lead, who succeed, who dominate, view struggle as the proving ground of greatness. They do not fear discomfort, they chase it. They understand that the moments when they want to quit, when they feel resistance, when their mind begs them to stop, these are the moments that matter most. Because pushing through them is what separates the weak from the strong, the ordinary from the elite. The warrior mindset is built through action. It is not something you think about. It is not something you wait to develop. It is something you do. It is waking up early even when you are tired. It is pushing through an intense workout even when your muscles burn. It is having the difficult conversation even when it makes you uncomfortable. It is taking the risk, making the move, facing the fear, because you know that avoiding it will only make you weaker. Most men believe that confidence comes first, that once they feel ready, they will take action. But this is backwards thinking. Action comes first. Confidence follows. The only way to become the kind of man who is unshakable, disciplined, and dominant in his own life is to act like it before you feel like it. Because the truth is, you will never feel ready. The mind will always look for excuses, for a way out, for a reason to delay. But the difference between powerful men and weak men is that powerful men do it anyway. Pain is temporary. Weakness is forever. The discomfort of pushing yourself will fade, but the regret of knowing you played small, that you avoided challenge, that you settled for less than you were capable of, that regret will haunt you for a lifetime. Every time you choose ease over effort, you reinforce weakness. Every time you justify skipping the work, you condition yourself to remain average. And every time you hesitate to step up when you know you should, you train yourself to be a follower instead of a leader. But the moment you start choosing strength over comfort, everything changes. You start to build momentum. You start to develop real confidence, the kind that comes not from empty affirmations, but from knowing that you are a man who follows through, a man who does not quit, a man who does not back down. You stop making excuses and start making progress. You begin to feel the shift, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You start to see yourself differently. And so does everyone else. Men who live with a warrior mindset do not complain about how hard life is. They do not whine about unfair circumstances or wait for opportunities to come to them. They take what they want. They build their own path. They do not rely on motivation because they understand that motivation is fleeting. Instead, they rely on discipline, the ability to do what needs to be done, regardless of how they feel in the moment. And because of this, they succeed where others fail. This is the truth that most men never realize: discipline is freedom. The man who lacks discipline may seem free, free to sleep in, free to indulge, free to avoid challenge, but he is a slave to his own weakness. The disciplined man, the man who has trained himself to push through pain, to seek out adversity, to sharpen himself against struggle, he is the man who is truly free. Because he is in control of himself. He is not ruled by impulse. He is not held back by fear. He is not dependent on comfort. And because of that, he is dangerous. If you want to break free from the mediocrity that keeps most men trapped, you must start embracing discomfort as a way of life. Stop avoiding what is hard. Stop making excuses. Stop waiting for the right moment. The right moment is now. Push yourself every single day, not just when you feel like it. Train your body, sharpen your mind, test your limits. Because every time you do, you are forging yourself into the kind of man who cannot be broken. The world belongs to men who are willing to suffer for their own greatness. And the weak? The men who stay comfortable, who avoid the fire, who never challenge themselves. They do not even belong to themselves. They are owned by fear, by laziness, by their own excuses. Make the choice, right now, to reject comfort. Choose strength instead. Choose to do the hard things, the painful things, the things that most men avoid. Because in doing so, you will separate yourself from the masses. You will step into the version of yourself that is waiting on the other side of struggle. In the next chapter, we will take this even further by exploring the art of emotional control. Because strength is not just physical, it is mental. A man who is ruled by his emotions, who reacts impulsively, who allows anger, fear, or doubt to dictate his actions, is a man who will never be truly powerful. True warriors are not only disciplined in their actions, they are disciplined in their minds. And mastering emotional control is the next critical step in your journey to becoming unstoppable. Chapter 9. Mastering Emotional Control. A man who cannot control his emotions is a man who will always be controlled by circumstances, by other people, by the whims of his environment. He is reactive instead of proactive, weak instead of strong, unstable instead of composed. And in a world that constantly tests men, that challenges their ability to remain grounded in chaos, the inability to control emotions is the difference between commanding respect and being dismissed as a liability. The modern nice guy is ruled by his emotions, though he rarely realizes it. He believes that because he does not lash out in anger or act aggressively, he is in control. But suppression is not control, it is avoidance. He suppresses frustration instead of addressing it. He avoids confrontation instead of engaging with strength. He tolerates disrespect instead of asserting his worth. And in doing so, he allows resentment to build, stress to accumulate, and anxiety to take hold. The result? He becomes passive-aggressive, easily shaken, and emotionally volatile in ways he cannot even recognize. True strength is not found in pretending emotions do not exist, nor is it found in acting out of impulse. It is found in mastery, in the ability to feel deeply but act intentionally. A man who has mastered his emotions does not deny them. He simply refuses to be ruled by them. He acknowledges anger but does not let it dictate his actions. He recognizes fear but does not let it stop him. He feels sadness but does not allow it to define him. He is in command, not a prisoner of his internal state. The greatest men in history were not emotionless. They were disciplined in how they expressed their emotions. Warriors on the battlefield, leaders in times of crisis, visionaries who shaped the world, They all felt the same emotions as every other man. The difference is, they did not allow those emotions to weaken them. They did not react, they responded. They did not lash out, they calculated. They did not let momentary feelings dictate lifelong decisions. They stood firm, immovable, unshaken, even in the face of chaos. And that is exactly what you must become. The first step in mastering emotional control is awareness. Most men go through life without understanding their own emotional triggers. They react without thinking, unaware of what is driving them. A single comment can make them angry. A minor setback can throw them into despair. A moment of rejection can send them spiraling into self-doubt. This is not strength. It is weakness masquerading as sensitivity. A man who is controlled by his emotions is a man who is easy to manipulate. He can be provoked into anger, guilt-tripped into submission, or flattered into compliance. But a man who is self-aware, who understands the source of his emotions and how to manage them, is a man who is untouchable. Emotional control begins with the ability to pause. When something triggers an emotional reaction, whether it is anger, fear, frustration, or doubt, the weak man reacts immediately. He lets his emotions dictate his next move, often making impulsive decisions that he regrets later. But the strong man steps back. He does not suppress what he feels, but he also does not let it control him. He observes it, analyzes it, and only then does he decide how to respond. This is a practice, a discipline that must be built over time. The ability to control emotions is like a muscle, it must be trained. One of the best ways to do this is through deliberate discomfort. If you only operate under ideal conditions, if you only practice emotional control when things are easy, you will fail the moment real pressure is applied. This is why men who seek comfort struggle so much with emotional mastery. They avoid stress, avoid confrontation, avoid any situation that tests them, and as a result, they remain fragile. But a man who deliberately places himself in difficult situations, who pushes himself to stay calm under pressure, who confronts stress instead of escaping it, becomes unshakable. This is why warriors train under extreme conditions before stepping onto the battlefield. This is why elite athletes push themselves to their limits in practice. They are conditioning their minds to remain steady even when everything around them is chaotic. You must do the same. Expose yourself to discomfort. Push yourself physically, mentally, emotionally. Stay composed in situations where you would normally react. Hold your ground when people try to provoke you. Learn to remain calm under pressure. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Another crucial aspect of emotional control is detachment. Weak men personalize everything. They take rejection as an attack on their worth. They interpret criticism as a sign of failure. They allow the emotions of the moment to consume them, making it impossible to think rationally. But strong men know that emotions are temporary. They do not allow a bad day to define their self-worth. They do not let fleeting feelings make permanent decisions. They detach, recognizing that their emotions are simply signals, not ultimate truths. This detachment is not numbness, it is clarity. It allows you to separate what is real from what is simply a momentary reaction. It gives you the power to choose your response rather than being controlled by automatic impulse. A man who has mastered detachment does not take things personally. If he is criticized, he assesses whether the criticism is valid instead of becoming defensive. If he faces rejection, He moves forward instead of wallowing in self-pity. If he experiences anger, he acknowledges it but does not let it consume him. He operates from logic, not just emotion. The ability to remain emotionally composed is one of the greatest indicators of a man's strength. It is what allows him to handle confrontation without losing control, to make powerful decisions without being clouded by doubt, to command respect in every area of life. A man who is easily rattled, who overreacts, who allows his emotions to dictate his behavior, will always be at the mercy of those who are more disciplined than he is. But a man who is calm, controlled, and unwavering? He becomes a force of nature. This level of mastery does not happen overnight, but it must be prioritized. Most men put no effort into developing their emotional strength. They train their bodies but not their minds. They seek discipline in work but let their emotions run unchecked. And then they wonder why they struggle to gain respect, to lead, to maintain control over their lives. Do not make this mistake. Your ability to master yourself is the foundation of everything else. From this point forward, commit to training your emotional discipline as rigorously as you would train your physical strength. When something angers you, pause before reacting. When fear arises, confront it rather than running from it. When rejection stings, remind yourself that it does not define you. Test yourself daily. Put yourself in situations that challenge your ability to remain composed. Let others lose their tempers. Let them be reactive. Let them be weak. You stay steady. Because once you master your emotions, you master yourself. And once you master yourself, nothing can control you. No external force, no opinion, no temporary setback will ever shake you. You will move through the world with the presence of a man who is in full command of his actions, of his mindset, of his reality. In the next chapter, we will uncover one of the biggest hidden dangers of being too nice, the resentment that builds beneath the surface. Because the truth is, nice guys do not just suffer in silence. They accumulate bitterness, frustration, and quiet rage. And if you do not address it, if you do not learn how to own your desires and express them with strength, that resentment will destroy you from the inside out. It is time to face it. And it is time to take control. Chapter 10. The Dark Side of Niceness, Hidden Resentment. A nice guy does not walk through life with open rage. He does not lash out, he does not express his frustrations openly, and he does not allow himself to explode in fury when he feels wronged. But that does not mean he is free from anger. In fact, quite the opposite is true. Beneath the surface of his agreeable demeanor, behind the patient smiles and accommodating words, lies something far darker: resentment. Resentment is the inevitable result of a man who constantly suppresses his needs. It is what builds inside a man who gives endlessly but receives nothing in return. It is what grows in a man who tolerates disrespect but tells himself it is not worth addressing. It is what festers when a man sacrifices his own desires, his own ambitions, his own truth, only to realize that his compliance has not made him more loved, more respected, or more fulfilled. It has only made him bitter. A man who lives for the approval of others, who always seeks to be agreeable, who prioritizes peace over his own self-respect, eventually wakes up to a painful realization. No one appreciates self-sacrifice when it is given for free. The world does not reward men who make themselves invisible. It does not admire those who suppress their true emotions to keep the peace. It does not shower gratitude upon the man who constantly bends over backward to accommodate others while neglecting himself. Instead, it takes from him and keeps taking. The nice guy, however, does not recognize this immediately. For years, perhaps even decades, he tells himself that he is doing the right thing. That by being kind, patient, and endlessly giving, he will eventually be rewarded. But as the years pass, he begins to notice something. The respect he thought he would earn never comes. The appreciation he expected never arrives. And instead of feeling valued, he feels empty. This is when the resentment starts to grow. Most nice guys do not believe they are angry men. But look closely, and you will see that their resentment manifests in subtle, insidious ways. Passive aggressiveness, sarcastic remarks, unspoken frustration, silent grudges held against people they were too afraid to stand up to. A suppressed anger that makes them cold and distant, even in relationships where they claim to care. This bitterness is not loud or explosive. It is quiet, corrosive, and deeply damaging. A man who holds in resentment does not just suffer emotionally, he suffers physically. Stress accumulates in his body, tension in his muscles, a heaviness in his chest. His energy is drained, his sleep is disrupted, his mind is restless. He begins to lose the fire that once drove him. He tells himself he is simply burned out or tired, but the truth is deeper than that. He is carrying the weight of a lifetime of unspoken anger, and it is crushing him. But what makes this resentment so dangerous is that it does not just stay inside. It leaks out. It shows up in his relationships, in his interactions, in his ability to connect with others. Women sense it. They may not be able to articulate it, but they feel the underlying bitterness, the suppressed frustration, the unspoken dissatisfaction. And it kills attraction. A man who is filled with unexpressed resentment cannot truly be present. He cannot give without expectation because, deep down, he still believes he is owed something in return. He cannot lead with confidence because his suppressed emotions keep him stuck in his own mind, overanalyzing, second-guessing, hesitating. He cannot stand firm in his boundaries because his entire life has been spent avoiding discomfort. And worst of all, he cannot respect himself because he knows, deep down, that he has been lying to himself all along. The only way to free yourself from resentment is to stop suppressing what you truly want. Nice guys do not just suffer because they give too much. They suffer because they give without honesty. They tell themselves they are being selfless, but in reality, they are often giving in the hopes of receiving something in return. Whether it is love, appreciation, or approval, they believe that by being good enough, they will eventually be rewarded. And when that reward never comes, they seethe. This is not real generosity. It is a transaction disguised as kindness. And it is a recipe for a lifetime of quiet misery. The way out is ownership. Ownership of your desires, ownership of your needs, ownership of your emotions. If you want respect, demand it. If you want appreciation, set standards that require it. If you feel angry, acknowledge it instead of burying it. Stop giving away your time, energy, and effort to people who do not reciprocate, and stop expecting the world to reward you simply for being a nice guy. Real men do not wait for validation. They do not passively hope that their kindness will be noticed. They set boundaries. They ask for what they want. They walk away from situations that do not serve them. And because of this, They do not carry resentment, because they do not allow themselves to be taken advantage of in the first place. There is a difference between suppressing emotions and controlling them. Weak men suppress. Strong men direct. Suppression is passive. It is the act of burying something without addressing it. Control is active. It is the ability to take what you feel and channel it in a way that serves you. Anger, frustration, and dissatisfaction are not inherently bad emotions. They are signals. They tell you when something is misaligned, when your boundaries are being violated, when you are living in a way that contradicts your true nature. A man who learns to listen to these signals, rather than suppress them, is a man who becomes powerful. He does not lash out in uncontrolled rage, nor does he sit in silence, allowing his bitterness to eat away at him. Instead, he takes action. He communicates clearly. He enforces his standards. He makes changes. A man who owns his emotions, who channels them effectively, who expresses them with strength rather than avoidance. This is the kind of man who commands respect. Not just from others, but from himself. The only way to rid yourself of resentment completely is to kill the part of you that expects something in return for simply existing. To let go of the need for approval, the silent expectation of reciprocity, the false belief that if you are just good enough, people will finally recognize your worth. They will not, and they should not, because the moment you make your self-worth dependent on how much you can give to others, you have already lost. The strongest men in the world do not need permission to take what they want. They do not wait for appreciation. They do not seek validation. They move through life with purpose. They give because they choose to, not because they expect something in return. And because of this, they never become bitter. Because their sense of value is not dictated by external recognition, it is dictated by the way they carry themselves, by the standards they set, by the respect they command. If you want to break free from resentment, stop waiting to be acknowledged. Stop hoping to be appreciated. Stop expecting the world to recognize your effort. Instead, recognize yourself. Assert yourself. Choose to live in a way where you do not need anything from anyone, where your confidence, your worth, and your power come entirely from within. Because the moment you do this, the resentment will disappear. Not because people will finally start giving you what you wanted, but because you will realize that you never needed it in the first place. In the next chapter, we will address one of the most paralyzing fears that keeps men stuck, the fear of rejection. Because until you learn to embrace rejection, to see it as a necessary part of growth rather than something to avoid, you will always hesitate to take the risks that could change your life. It is time to stop fearing rejection. It is time to use it as fuel. Chapter 11. Turning rejection into fuel for growth. Rejection is a word that strikes fear into the heart of most men. It is the reason so many hold back, hesitate, and avoid taking action. They fear the sting of disapproval, the discomfort of being turned away, the hit to their ego when they are told, "No, you are not enough." But this fear is precisely what keeps men weak. It stops them from pursuing the opportunities that could change their lives, from approaching the women they desire, from asking for the raise they deserve, from asserting themselves in moments that demand strength. They let the possibility of rejection dictate their actions, and in doing so, they give away their power. But here is the truth that most men fail to grasp: rejection is not the enemy. It is the gateway to power. Every strong, confident, successful man you admire has been rejected more times than you can count. Not once. Not twice. Thousands of times. He has failed, been turned down, been laughed at, been dismissed, and yet, he persisted. He understood something that most men never will. Rejection is not a stop sign. It is a stepping stone. It is not proof that you are unworthy, it is proof that you are in the game. The nice guy, however, cannot handle rejection because he takes it personally. When a woman turns him down, he assumes it means he is not good enough. When an employer does not hire him, he believes he is not valuable. When his ideas are dismissed, he takes it as proof that he is not respected. And because he fears this emotional discomfort, he stops trying altogether. He plays it safe, staying within the boundaries of what he knows will not lead to rejection. But in doing so, he robs himself of the very experiences that would make him stronger. A powerful man, on the other hand, sees rejection for what it truly is: feedback. It is not an attack. It is not a definitive judgment of his worth. It is simply information. When he is rejected by a woman, he does not collapse into self-doubt. He analyzes the situation, refines his approach, and tries again. When he is denied an opportunity, he does not shrink, he finds another way. He understands that every rejection he faces is a lesson, a refinement process, a necessary part of his evolution. And because of this, he becomes immune to the fear that paralyzes weaker men. The greatest tragedy is that most men would rather live a small, unfulfilled life than risk rejection. They will stay in the comfort of the familiar, even if it means missing out on the life they truly desire. They will avoid the woman they want to talk to, convincing themselves that it wouldn't have worked out anyway. They will settle for a job that does not challenge them because at least it's stable. They will hold back their true opinions in conversation because it's not worth the argument. What they do not realize is that by avoiding rejection, they are rejecting themselves. They are choosing self-abandonment over temporary discomfort. They are saying, "My fear matters more than my growth." But here's what separates powerful men from the rest. They fear mediocrity more than they fear rejection. They understand that the real pain is not hearing no. It is looking back at their lives with regret, knowing they never even tried. If you want to become a man who is immune to rejection, you must change how you see it. Most men view rejection as proof that they are not good enough. But the truth is, rejection is simply proof that you are stretching beyond your current limits. It means you are testing boundaries, pushing into new territory, exposing yourself to experiences that will forge you into something greater. Imagine two men. The first man never experiences rejection because he never takes risks. He never speaks up, never pursues anything outside his comfort zone, never makes bold moves. He lives in a bubble of safety. The second man faces rejection constantly because he is always testing his limits. He is always putting himself in situations where failure is possible. He gets turned down, he gets ignored, he gets dismissed. But he also grows. He sharpens his skills. He refines his confidence. And eventually, he starts winning, not because he was immune to rejection, but because he was willing to face it until it no longer had power over him. Rejection is a numbers game. The more you experience it, the less it affects you. If you have been rejected by 5 women in your entire life, each rejection feels massive. If you have been rejected by 500 women, it is meaningless. It is just another moment in the process. And here is the key. The man who has been rejected 500 times has also succeeded more times than the man who never tried. He has dated more, built more, achieved more, because he refused to let rejection stop him. The only way to eliminate the fear of rejection is to expose yourself to it repeatedly. If you are terrified of approaching women, approach more of them, not to win, but to get used to hearing no. If you hesitate to speak your mind in conversations, start voicing your opinions more frequently, not to be liked, but to build your ability to handle disagreement. If you avoid taking risks in your career, start asking for what you want, not because you expect an immediate yes, but because you need to develop the ability to withstand no. This is the process of desensitization. What once seemed terrifying becomes normal. What once felt overwhelming becomes irrelevant. The men who are immune to rejection are not born that way. They trained themselves to become that way. They took enough risks, faced enough no's, and experienced enough failures that they became numb to the sting of it. And once you reach that point, you become unstoppable. The final step in conquering rejection is learning to use it as fuel. Every rejection should be seen as a challenge, an opportunity to sharpen yourself, an invitation to grow stronger. If you get turned down, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? If an opportunity falls through, ask, how can I improve for next time? Instead of shrinking, expand. Instead of backing down, level up. The difference between weak men and strong men is not that strong men never get rejected. It is that they use rejection to fuel them rather than break them. The greatest athletes, entrepreneurs, leaders, and warriors did not rise to power by avoiding rejection. They embraced it. They learned from it. And they kept going, long after weaker men would have quit. This is your choice now. Will you allow the fear of rejection to keep you small? Will you let it control you, dictate your actions, and prevent you from becoming who you are meant to be? Or will you take it as a challenge, an initiation into a life of strength, resilience, and absolute confidence? The men who succeed are not the ones who never hear no. They are the ones who hear no 1,000 times and keep going until they finally get their yes. That is who you must become. In the next chapter, we will dismantle one of the greatest lies that nice guys believe, that women respect submission. Because they do not. The men who are truly desired, truly admired, and truly respected are the men who own themselves completely. It is time to break free from the illusion that playing it safe makes you attractive. Because attraction is not built on niceness, it is built on power. Chapter 12. Why women respect strength, not submission. Many men have been led to believe a dangerous lie. That the way to win a woman's love and admiration is to be endlessly agreeable, self-sacrificing, and accommodating. They believe that if they are patient enough, if they listen without asserting themselves, if they anticipate her every need before she even expresses it, they will be rewarded with devotion in return. But this is not how attraction works. It is not how respect is earned. And it is certainly not how powerful men operate. Women do not respect men who submit to them. They do not admire men who try to win their favor by becoming what they think she wants. They may tolerate these men, they may even befriend them, but they do not desire them. Because true attraction is not built on compliance, it is built on strength. A woman may say she wants a nice guy, who always puts her first, who is emotionally available, who is endlessly accommodating, but observe her actions, and you will see a different story. Women respect men who have their own mission, who lead with confidence, who are willing to walk away rather than compromise their own standards. They do not want a man who prioritizes them over himself. They want a man who prioritizes his own power and lets them come along for the journey. This is where the nice guy fails. He believes that by being agreeable, by never disagreeing, by bending himself to accommodate her, he will create a relationship built on harmony. But in reality, he creates a relationship built on resentment and boredom. He slowly erodes her respect for him, because she sees, whether consciously or subconsciously, that he does not fully own himself. He relies on her approval, on her validation, on her emotional cues to determine how he should behave. And nothing kills attraction faster than neediness disguised as kindness. A woman's attraction is not logical, it is instinctual. She does not sit down and calculate who would make the most agreeable, safe, conflict-free partner. She responds to a man on a deeper level, drawn to qualities that signal strength, stability, and leadership. This is why powerful men, whether warriors, entrepreneurs, artists, or rebels, have always captivated women throughout history. They are not men who wait for permission. They are not men who seek approval. They are men who move through life with purpose, and in doing so, they create an undeniable gravitational pull. A man who is truly attractive does not put a woman on a pedestal. He does not treat her like a goddess while treating himself like a servant. He does not overinvest before she has earned it, nor does he revolve his world around her. Instead, he treats her as a valued companion, not as the center of his existence. And because of this, she respects him. She sees that he is a man of high value, a man who does not need to prove himself through self-sacrifice. The nice guy believes that if he is just nice enough, if he just gives more, listens more, accommodates more, then a woman will recognize his value and reciprocate. But this is not how relationships work. A woman does not fall for a man because he is endlessly available. She falls for a man who challenges her, who excites her, who makes her feel something. A man who is a force of nature, not a convenient accessory. There is a reason why women consistently lose interest in men who are too available, too agreeable, too eager to please. At first, she may appreciate his kindness, his willingness to go out of his way for her. But over time, that appreciation turns into indifference, and then into disgust. She senses that he lacks the fire of a man who knows his worth. She sees that he is playing not to lose instead of playing to win. And nothing is less attractive than a man who is afraid to assert himself. Think of the men throughout history who have been revered, desired, and respected. Were they known for being excessively agreeable? Were they loved because they constantly sought approval? No. They were leaders. They were risk-takers. They were men who were not afraid to say no. A man who submits to a woman's every whim does not earn her love, he earns her pity. She may stay with him out of obligation, out of comfort, out of convenience. But she will never truly respect him. And without respect, there is no attraction. This does not mean a man should be controlling, aggressive, or dismissive of a woman's emotions. Strength is not about dominance, it is about self-possession. It is about moving with purpose, setting boundaries, and never apologizing for who you are. It is about leading with conviction, not passively following. If you want to be the kind of man who naturally commands respect from women, you must first command respect from yourself. This means never making a woman the center of your world. A man with purpose, vision, and self-respect does not revolve his life around a relationship. He builds something greater, and if she is worthy, she comes along for the journey. Not tolerating disrespect. If a woman tests you, if she crosses a boundary, if she treats you with indifference, you do not reward that behavior. You set the standard for how you expect to be treated, and you enforce it. Being willing to walk away. The strongest negotiating position in life and in relationships is being willing to walk away if your standards are not met. The moment a woman senses that you are afraid to lose her, she loses attraction. But when she knows that you can replace her, that your life is rich with purpose and options, she respects you at a deep level. Not suppressing your truth. Say what you mean. Express your opinions without watering them down. Too many men filter their words, afraid of offending, afraid of rocking the boat. But a man who owns himself fully is unafraid to speak with certainty. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, if you have been the man who constantly gives but rarely receives, who bends over backward for women who do not value you, who avoids confrontation to keep the peace, then it is time to make a change. The world does not reward men who play small. Women do not fall for men who are afraid to lead. And you will never truly step into your power until you let go of the need to be liked and start living in a way that commands respect. Attraction is not about being nice. It is about being strong. It is about carrying yourself with presence, with certainty, with the quiet confidence of a man who does not need approval to validate his worth. It is about setting a standard for how you live, how you love, and how you move through the world, and refusing to lower that standard for anyone. If you are ready to step into this power, you must begin now. Stop waiting for permission. Stop seeking validation. Start moving as if you are already the man you know you are capable of being. Because the moment you do, everything changes. Women will sense it. The world will respond to it. And most importantly, you will feel it, deep in your core, in the way you walk, in the way you speak, in the way you carry yourself as a man who is unshakable. In the next chapter, we will take this even further. Because attraction is not just about external strength, it is about unshakable self-worth. And until you build a foundation of inner confidence that cannot be swayed by rejection, by validation, or by external approval, you will always be at the mercy of the world. It is time to own your worth, not through words, but through action. Because the world does not give power to men who ask for it. It gives power to men who take it. Chapter 13. Building unshakable self-worth. A man's worth is not determined by external validation. It is not dictated by a woman's approval, by society's expectations, or by how much praise he receives from others. His worth is something he must claim for himself, something he must own, regardless of who recognizes it. And yet, most men go through life allowing their sense of value to be determined by forces outside of their control. They tie their confidence to whether or not they are accepted. They measure their self-esteem by how others treat them. They allow the world to dictate whether they feel powerful or powerless. This is why so many men struggle with self-worth. They do not build it from within. They seek it from without. And because of this, they remain fragile. They feel strong when they are validated, but weak when they are criticized. They feel worthy when they are admired, but unworthy when they are ignored. They ride an emotional roller coaster, constantly looking for proof that they are good enough, rather than deciding that they are. But here is the truth. A man who truly values himself does not need external approval to feel worthy. His worth is non-negotiable, unshakable, and untouchable because it comes from within. Most men are trained from a young age to base their self-worth on what they do rather than on who they are. They are taught that they must earn their value through achievements, through pleasing others, through meeting expectations set by family, society, or women. They believe that if they can just be successful enough, fit enough, wealthy enough, desirable enough, then they will finally feel worthy. But this mindset creates a dangerous trap. Because the moment a man ties his worth to external factors, he becomes a slave to them. If his business fails, his confidence crumbles. If a woman leaves him, he feels like less of a man. If he is criticized or rejected, he begins to doubt himself. He lives in a constant state of proving rather than simply being. The truth is, self-worth is not about how much you achieve. It is not about how much you are liked. It is about the relationship you have with yourself. And until you reclaim that relationship, until you decide that your worth is absolute, untouchable, and beyond negotiation, you will always be at the mercy of the world. The moment a man stops looking for permission to feel valuable is the moment he becomes dangerous. Because a man who owns his worth moves through life differently. He does not need constant validation. He does not crumble when faced with rejection. He does not alter himself to fit into other people's expectations. He is secure in himself, not because others recognize his value, but because he does. This is the shift that separates powerful men from weak men. Weak men wait for the world to tell them they are worthy. Strong men decide that they are. And because of this, their confidence is unbreakable. They do not shrink when criticized. They do not chase approval. They do not need external reinforcement to feel whole. They have built their worth on a foundation that cannot be shaken. If you want to reach this level of self-mastery, you must rebuild the way you see yourself from the ground up. This means shifting from external validation to internal ownership. It means no longer seeking proof of your worth, but instead acting in alignment with the truth that you already have it. Here is how you do that. 1. Stop asking for permission to feel worthy. Most men are constantly looking for signs that they are good enough. They seek reassurance from women, from friends, from their job, from social media. They wait for approval before they allow themselves to feel valuable. But a man who owns his worth does not ask for permission. He claims it. He walks into every room, every situation, every challenge knowing that he belongs, not because someone told him he does, but because he has decided that he does. This is the fundamental difference between men who command respect and men who beg for it. One owns his presence. The other waits to be validated. Choose to own it. 2. Stop tying your worth to your success. Your worth is not your achievements. It is not how much money you make. It is not whether you have the perfect body, the perfect woman, or the perfect career. Yes, these things are important. Yes, you should strive for excellence. But they do not define you. If you tie your self-worth to your achievements, then every time you fail, your confidence will shatter. And failure is inevitable. No man wins all the time. No man succeeds in every attempt. A man who ties his worth to success is a man who will always be fragile. But a man who builds his worth from within, independent of outcomes, is a man who is unshakable. 3. Set standards and enforce them relentlessly. A man who has high self-worth does not accept mediocrity. Not in himself, not in others, not in his life. He has standards for how he treats himself, how he allows others to treat him, and how he moves through the world. And he enforces those standards. This means walking away from relationships that do not serve you, saying no to things that do not align with your values, refusing to compromise your integrity just to be liked. The moment you lower your standards, you send yourself the message that your worth is negotiable. It is not. Set your standards high and never back down. 4. Build your internal confidence through action. Confidence does not come from affirmations. It does not come from positive thinking. It comes from action. The more you push yourself beyond your limits, the more proof you give yourself that you are strong. The more you face rejection and keep moving, the more you reinforce that you are untouchable. Confidence is earned through challenge, through discomfort, through stepping into situations where failure is possible and choosing to show up anyway. 5. Be willing to be alone. A man who has true self-worth is never afraid to be alone. He does not need a woman, a social group, or external validation to feel complete. He walks his path, knowing that those who are worthy will walk with him, but that he does not need them to. Weak men cling to people out of fear. Strong men choose who they allow in their lives. And if you are willing to be alone, if you are willing to stand firm even when no one is watching, then you will develop a self-worth that is indestructible. The moment you own your worth, everything changes. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself. You stop second-guessing your decisions. You walk with a different energy, one that others sense without you having to say a word. Women are drawn to this energy. They may not be able to articulate why, but they feel it. They respect it. The world, too, responds differently to a man who is truly self-assured. Opportunities appear. People take notice. Not because you are trying to be noticed, but because self-ownership is a rare trait in a world of insecure men. But the greatest shift happens within. You feel free. Free from the need for approval. Free from the fear of rejection. Free from the burden of constantly trying to be enough. Because you finally realize, you already are. The final step in this transformation is learning how to command respect in every area of life. Because a man who owns his worth does not just feel confident, he moves with authority. He walks into a room, and people sense that he is someone to take seriously. He speaks, and people listen. In the next chapter, we will take this to the next level. You will learn how to cultivate the kind of presence that makes people respect you without you having to demand it. Because respect is not given, it is commanded. And the men who know how to command it own the world. Chapter 14. How to command respect in every area of life. Respect is not something you ask for. It is not something you beg for. And it is certainly not something you can fake. It is something you command. A man who is truly respected does not need to announce his strength. He exudes it. He does not need to convince people that he is worthy. They know it the moment he walks into a room. His presence, his demeanor, his way of moving through the world make it clear. This is a man who is not to be taken lightly. But most men do not command respect. They hope for it. They try to earn it through people-pleasing, through passive submission, through accommodating others at the expense of themselves. And then they wonder why they are ignored, overlooked, or treated as second class. They do not realize that respect is not given to men who ask for it. It is given to men who demand it, not through words, but through how they carry themselves. The difference between men who command respect and men who are walked over comes down to a few key principles. Master these, and you will never have to ask for respect again. It will become an automatic response from those around you. 1. Speak with certainty, not hesitation. A man who is respected does not speak as if he is unsure of himself. He does not qualify his statements with, "Well, I think," or "I could be wrong," but, or "Maybe it's just me." He speaks with certainty, with authority, with conviction. This does not mean he is arrogant or refuses to acknowledge when he is wrong, but it means that when he speaks, he does so as if he means it. People respect decisiveness. They respect men who say what they mean and mean what they say. They do not respect a man who hesitates, who backtracks, who looks for validation before expressing himself. The moment you start speaking as if you expect to be listened to, you will notice a shift. People will lean in. They will pay attention. Because a man who believes in himself commands the attention of those around him. 2. Enforce your boundaries without apology. One of the fastest ways to lose respect is to allow people to cross your boundaries without consequence. A man who is constantly disrespected is not a victim. He is a participant in his own mistreatment. Because every time he allows someone to walk over him, to take advantage of him, to treat him as less than he is worth, he is training them to continue. A man who commands respect sets boundaries and enforces them. He does not tolerate disrespect. He does not let people waste his time. He does not allow himself to be manipulated by guilt, by pressure, or by the opinions of others. And most importantly, he does not explain himself when he enforces his standards. He does not say, "I hope you understand," or "Sorry, but I have to say no." He simply acts. And people adjust accordingly. 3. Be selective with your time and attention. The more available you are, the less valuable you appear. This is a fundamental truth that weak men ignore. They spread themselves thin, always ready to respond to every request, every invitation, every demand for their attention. And because they are so accessible, they are taken for granted. A man who commands respect is selective about who and what he gives his time to. He does not drop everything the moment someone needs him. He does not overextend himself in relationships or social circles where he is not valued. He prioritizes his own growth, his own goals, his own mission. And because of this, people recognize that his time is valuable. They do not take it lightly, because they know it is not guaranteed. 4. Control your emotions, never let them control you. Weak men are emotionally reactive. They let external circumstances dictate how they feel. They explode in anger when provoked. They sulk in silence when things do not go their way. They allow other people's words and actions to dictate their internal state. And because of this, they are easily manipulated. A man who commands respect is in control of himself at all times. He does not get rattled by insults. He does not flinch in the face of confrontation. He does not let emotional impulses override his logic and composure. He remains steady, unshaken, immovable. And because of this, people see him as a force, a man who cannot be thrown off course by petty drama or trivial challenges. 5. Lead, do not follow. Respect is not given to followers. It is given to leaders. And leadership is not about a title, it is about presence. A man who commands respect is the kind of man others look to for direction, for certainty, for strength. He does not wait to be led. He steps forward and takes control. This applies in every area of life. In relationships, a respected man sets the tone, makes decisions, and leads with confidence. He does not defer everything to his partner, hoping to please her. He guides the dynamic with strength and presence. In social circles, a respected man does not desperately try to fit in. He moves in his own direction, and because of this, people are naturally drawn to him. In business and career, a respected man takes initiative. He does not wait to be told what to do. He creates, he builds, he owns his role. A man who leads is a man who commands respect. A man who follows, who hesitates, who seeks direction from others, he is tolerated, but never truly admired. 6. Move with purpose, not aimlessness. A man without a mission is a man without respect. Because respect is given to men who are going somewhere. A man with purpose, with vision, with drive, he moves differently. He does not waste time on meaningless distractions. He does not entertain people who do not align with his goals. He is focused, locked in, intentional. When you walk with purpose, people notice. They sense that you are not like other men. They recognize that you are building something, that you are not lost, that you are a man of substance. And because of this, they respect you, not because you asked for it, but because they feel it. 7. Be willing to walk away from anything that disrespects you. This is the ultimate test of whether or not you truly command respect. Are you willing to walk away? From people who do not value you? From situations that drain you? From relationships, friendships, jobs, and environments that do not align with your standards? Most men are afraid to walk away. They cling to relationships, to jobs, to friendships that do not serve them because they are afraid to lose what they have. But a man who commands respect does not fear loss. He understands that by walking away from things that do not serve him, he creates space for things that do. And this is why he is respected. Because he is not desperate. He is not needy. He is in control. The moment you stop asking for respect and start commanding it, everything changes. People treat you differently. Women look at you differently. Opportunities appear. The world itself begins to move in your favor, not because you demanded respect, but because you became the kind of man who deserves it. And this is not something you do once, it is something you embody. Every day. In every interaction. In the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself. Because when respect becomes who you are, it is no longer something you have to chase. It becomes something that follows you. In the next chapter, we will take this even further, because respect is just the foundation. The ultimate goal is not just to be respected, but to operate by a code. A personal set of values that separates the weak from the strong, the ordinary from the extraordinary. Because the men who dominate life are not just respected, they are built differently. And it is time for you to step into that power. Chapter 15. The Code of the High-Value Man. A man who moves through life without a personal code is a man who is easily swayed, easily influenced, and easily lost. He becomes reactive instead of proactive, controlled instead of in control. But a man who operates by a set of unwavering principles, by a code that defines who he is and how he moves, is a man who cannot be shaken. He does not need constant reminders of what to do or how to behave. His code is ingrained in him. It is what separates him from the masses, from the men who drift through life aimlessly, unsure of themselves and easily manipulated. A high-value man does not live by the expectations of others. He lives by the expectations he sets for himself. His code is his compass. It determines how he handles adversity, how he interacts with people, how he pursues his goals, and how he carries himself in every situation. And the difference between a man who lives by a strong personal code and a man who does not is the difference between power and weakness, between respect and irrelevance, between greatness and mediocrity. If you want to be truly unstoppable, if you want to walk through life as a man who is respected, admired, and truly free, then you must develop and enforce your own code. And once you do, it must become non-negotiable. 1. The law of absolute self-respect. A high-value man never tolerates disrespect, not from others, and not from himself. He does not engage with people who diminish his worth. He does not stay in relationships, friendships, or environments where he is not valued. And he does not lower his standards to make others comfortable. But the key to commanding respect from the world is first commanding it from yourself. Most men allow their own actions to betray them. They procrastinate, they make excuses, they tolerate their own laziness, and then they wonder why no one respects them. The truth is, if you do not respect yourself, no one else will. The man who operates by this law walks differently. He moves with the certainty of someone who knows his value. He does not seek approval. He does not beg for attention. He simply exists in a way that demands respect. 2. The law of relentless self-discipline. Weak men operate based on how they feel. If they feel motivated, they take action. If they feel tired, they quit. If they feel discouraged, they give up. Their emotions dictate their discipline. A high-value man does not live this way. He operates based on commitment, not emotion. He does what needs to be done whether he feels like it or not. He trains his body, sharpens his mind, and builds his empire, not because he is always motivated, but because he is disciplined. This is what separates those who succeed from those who watch from the sidelines. The world does not reward effort, it rewards results. And results only come to the man who shows up every single day, regardless of circumstances. 3. The law of non-attachment to outcomes. Most men are slaves to their circumstances. If things go well, they feel good. If things go poorly, they fall apart. Their emotions are tied to external events, which means they are never in control. A high-value man understands that outcomes do not define him. He pursues goals relentlessly, but he is not emotionally attached to whether he succeeds or fails. He understands that failure is a necessary part of the process, and he does not take it personally. He is not afraid of rejection, of setbacks, of things not going his way, because he is rooted in himself, not in external validation. This mindset makes him unstoppable. Because a man who does not fear failure, who does not need constant reassurance, who does not base his self-worth on results, is a man who will keep pushing forward no matter what. 4. The law of strength in solitude. Most men are terrified of being alone. They seek constant validation from others, needing social approval, needing someone to fill the void inside them. Because of this, they attach themselves to the wrong people, stay in toxic relationships, and tolerate disrespect, simply because they fear isolation. A high-value man is different. He is completely comfortable in his own presence. He does not need distractions to escape himself. He does not need a woman, a friend group, or social media to feel complete. He understands that solitude is where strength is forged. A man who is unafraid of being alone is a man who cannot be manipulated. He is independent, self-sufficient, and free. And because of this, people are drawn to him, not because he needs them, but because they want to be in his presence. 5. The law of ruthless standards. A high-value man does not accept mediocrity in any area of his life. He does not let himself slip into bad habits. He does not tolerate low-effort friendships or one-sided relationships. He does not surround himself with weak, negative people who drag him down. Most men live passively, accepting whatever comes their way. But a man who commands his life sets ruthless standards and enforces them without apology. This means cutting out people who drain your energy, walking away from situations that do not align with your values, refusing to lower your expectations just to fit in. Weak men fear enforcing standards because they fear losing people. But strong men know that enforcing high standards filters out those who do not belong in their lives. And the ones who remain? They are the ones who truly respect you. 6. The law of relentless action. A high-value man is a man of action. He does not overthink. He does not hesitate. He does not wait for the perfect moment. He moves. He builds. He executes. Most men waste years of their lives stuck in indecision. They wait until they feel ready. They wait for permission. They wait for a guarantee of success before they take the first step. And in doing so, they waste time that they will never get back. The high-value man understands that hesitation is the killer of dreams. That the only way to get what he wants is to take relentless action, adjusting and learning along the way. He does not overanalyze. He decides, and he moves forward. 7. The law of walking away without fear. The ultimate test of a high-value man is his ability to walk away from people, from situations, from anything that does not serve him. Most men cling to things that no longer benefit them. They stay in dead-end relationships. They remain in jobs they hate. They tolerate mistreatment because they fear losing what they have. A man who operates by this law is truly free. He does not fear loss. He understands that nothing is permanent, and he refuses to let attachment control him. If something is no longer aligned with his vision, he leaves, without regret, without second-guessing, without looking back. And this is why he is respected. Because a man who is willing to walk away is a man who is in control. Most men drift through life without direction. They adapt to their surroundings instead of shaping them. They adjust themselves to please others instead of standing firm in who they are. And because of this, they remain weak, unfulfilled, and forgotten. A man who lives by a code is different. He is respected. He is followed. He is seen as a force to be reckoned with, not because he asks for it, but because he embodies it. You must decide now. Will you be like every other man, controlled by his emotions, his fears, and his need for validation? Or will you build yourself into a man who moves through life with absolute certainty, never apologizing for his strength, never negotiating his standards, never living by anything other than his own unshakable code? The choice is yours. In the final chapter, we will discuss how to make these changes permanent. Because becoming this man is not a one-time decision, it is a lifelong commitment. And only those who truly embrace it will rise above the rest. Breaking free for good. The final transformation. The journey from weakness to strength, from seeking approval to commanding respect, from being lost to becoming unshakable, is not a quick fix. It is not something you decide once and then forget. It is a lifelong transformation. It requires not just knowledge, but action. Not just awareness, but discipline. Not just desire, but a relentless commitment to becoming the man you were meant to be. Most men fail to complete this transformation because they get stuck in cycles of temporary improvement. They make changes, they see progress, but then they slip back into old patterns. They allow comfort to creep back in. They let external influences weaken them. They forget that this is not a phase. It is a permanent upgrade to how they operate. If you are reading this, you now know the truth. You have seen the difference between the man who bends to the world and the man who bends the world to his will. You understand the price of weakness and the power of strength. And now, you must decide, will you be one of the few who fully step into their power? Or will you be like the majority, who understand what they should do but never fully commit to doing it? There is no transformation without destruction. If you want to become the kind of man who is truly free, truly powerful, and truly respected, you must be willing to kill the version of yourself that was weak. The version of you that sought approval. The version of you that was afraid to enforce boundaries. The version of you that hesitated, overthought, and let fear dictate your actions. That man must die. Completely. Permanently. Because as long as he exists, even in small ways, he will try to pull you back into the life you have outgrown. Most men try to make changes while still holding on to pieces of their old selves. They try to build confidence while still avoiding confrontation. They try to set boundaries but still fear losing people. They try to lead but still crave validation. And because of this, they never fully step into their new identity. If you truly want to break free for good, you must fully commit. You must burn the bridge back to your old life. You must decide that there is no going back, no version of reality where you tolerate what you once did, no scenario where you revert to being the man you used to be. This is what separates those who truly transform from those who only try. Knowledge is nothing without application. You have learned everything you need to break free from weakness, but now, you must prove it. Not to anyone else, to yourself. The world will test you. You will be challenged. People who are used to the old version of you will resist your changes. They will push back when you assert yourself. They will question why you are suddenly enforcing boundaries. Women who once saw you as the nice guy will notice the shift, and some will not know how to handle it. Weak men will feel uncomfortable around you because your strength will highlight their own lack of discipline. Expect this. Anticipate it. And stand firm. Because this is the moment when most men falter. They begin to change, but when the world pushes back, they hesitate. They wonder if they are being too harsh, if they should go back to the way things were, if they shouldn't make others uncomfortable with their growth. And in that moment, they have a choice. Revert to weakness and blend back in with the masses. Or stand their ground and become unbreakable. What you must understand is this. Every test you face is an opportunity to solidify your transformation. Every time you enforce a boundary, every time you hold your frame in a difficult situation, every time you refuse to let external forces dictate your worth, you are proving to yourself that this is no longer an act. It is who you are now. The ritual of reinforcement, making this permanent. The most powerful men do not rely on motivation to maintain their strength. They build systems. They create rituals that reinforce their identity every single day. If you want this transformation to last, you must do the same. Here are 5 essential rituals that will ensure you never slip back into your old ways. 1. Daily reflection and calibration. Every day, take time to assess yourself. Did you uphold your standards? Did you act in alignment with your highest self? Where did you hesitate, and how can you correct it tomorrow? Self-awareness is your greatest weapon. Never let a day go by without recalibrating your mindset and actions. 2. Physical mastery as a non-negotiable. A strong mind requires a strong body. Training is not just about aesthetics, it is about discipline, control, and presence. Your physical state influences your mental state. When you push your body daily, you reinforce the identity of a man who is in control. Never skip this. 3. The 3-second rule for action. If something needs to be done, do it immediately. The moment you hesitate, fear starts to creep in. Whether it is speaking up, making a decision, or taking a risk, act within 3 seconds. Train yourself to be a man who moves, not a man who overthinks. 4. Absolute accountability. No more excuses. No more blaming circumstances. No more waiting for the right moment. Hold yourself 100% responsible for everything in your life. If something is not how you want it, fix it. A man who takes full ownership of his life is a man who cannot be stopped. 5. The willingness to walk away. The final and most powerful reinforcement. Be willing to walk away from anything that does not serve you. A man who is not afraid to lose is a man who cannot be controlled. If you have this mindset, you will move with a confidence that most men will never understand. If you have followed this journey, you already feel the shift happening inside you. You already know what must be done. But now, the real test begins. Do you commit fully, or do you let this be just another phase? Weak men will close this book, nod their heads, and say, "That was powerful." And then they will go back to their old habits, waiting for someday to step into their power. But a real man? A man who is done playing small, done seeking approval, done tolerating weakness in himself? He takes action. Immediately. This is your moment. Right now. There is no later. There is no eventually. There is only now. Step into your power. Own your life. Become the man who commands respect, who moves with certainty, who never negotiates his worth. Because once you do, there is no going back.